so let's say that I went back and I was like, awesome, I have this super cool... I'm not gonna lie, I don't actually hate the way this looks. I feel like I should, but I don't. Oh, one thing I did actually want to talk about. You definitely want to avoid super horrible UV seams in your object. And this is like... it's kind of unavoidable to have some seams in your object, but what you want to avoid is something like this. So I'll just, I'm just going to grab this edge here. What? All right, I'm going to grab this edge here, and I'm just going to cut that. And you'll notice as soon as I do that, this happens, and it looks really gross. This is just texture stretching because of a combination of where the seam in the model is, and the fact that the model is smooth. If I unsmooth this, it doesn't look nearly... It's actually pretty much not noticeable at all. You do just get this texture pulling with smoothed objects. There's not a great way to get rid of it, but you can minimize it if you need to. Again, first and foremost, don't put this in the front of your object. It's a terrible decision. But if you do have this issue, inserting more edge loops around the offending edge will help. It won't fix the issue completely, but you'll notice, so like once I add these edge loops and re-smooth, there's still a little bit of pulling in here, but it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. So just be aware of that. Again, this is not so much an issue for like game models that aren't going to be smoothed, things that are meant to stay low poly, but if you smooth it, this is like definitely something that might show up to be aware of. If you guys are in the animation major, you're going to have to like get used to hiding this kind of crapola. Yeah. So again, just try to, first and foremost, don't put this in the front of your object like I just did. And then you can minimize the effect by adding extra edge loops. These loops basically just tell Maya to basically don't stretch this as far. They kind of like hold the seam in place so that it doesn't look like this. So yeah. Any questions about that? Oh. All right, cool. I'm gonna... What am I doing? All right, I'm going to sew that back together because that's just gross. All right, so if I wanted to, I'm gonna go back into my render and say maybe I want a nice sort of random texture to this on the ground. Perhaps a cloth texture would be appealing. I will just assign a new AI surface shader to this cloth and be like, boom, it looks great. Where is my render view? There we go. Be like, awesome, we have this super shiny cloth texture now. Not ridiculous looking at all. So I'm actually gonna go, if you click on this little blue thing here, you can like highlight a certain thing and it'll only update this section of the render. It can help not crash the crap out of your computer. So that's what I'm gonna do. Again, this little blue thing, this is in the Arnold render view. It's similar to an IPR in the standard Maya view. But anyway, so I'm gonna add a bump map to this, and I'm gonna go down, and instead of doing a file texture, I'm gonna do this little cloth. It's like a Maya cloth texture. And you can see, so like when I put this on my thing, I totally need to UV this ground plane. I have not done this. Throw a quick automatic map on that. And you can see that it makes this sort of like weird, funky looking kind of bumpy texture. And you can see that it shows my render. So the one thing that I'm going to do, I just deleted the history on my, my ground plane. It makes it easier to access the shader. I shall call this cloth. So I'm going to go into my bump map, and you can see, so here, like clearly this cloth texture is unrealistically large. So what I'm going to do, if you look up here, there's this place 2D texture node, and I've been kind of fiddling on and off with this all day. But it does a really, really neat thing. So let me actually open my UV editor. Yeah, cool. So if I look at this right now, it's basically repeating, this repeat U and V is set to 4. So what it's doing is like basically taking like this square this little tileable square of texture and duplicating it 1, 2, 3, 4 times on my UV grid. So if I set this to something like 8, you can see that it's actually repeating the texture on the UV grid. So this is really, really handy for if you're just like using a Maya checker texture or cloth texture. You can tweak it really, really easily. And if you're using like a tileable file texture, you can also do it with that. The upside of that is that you don't need, you could texture like a whole object with a, 200 pixel image that's repeated 50 times, and it's smaller file size, and it's also going to pretty much end up looking the same, like since it's being repeated so much, as you zoom into that object, it's going to not like degrade the texture too badly. Yeah, but anywho. But yeah, so again, that's just in the place 2D texture node next to like the cloth node or the file node or whatever. Let's go in here and it's repeat U and V. So in this case, I'm going to say something maybe like 200. And it gives me like a little cloth texture. I'm actually kind of I kind of like the sort of large burlap effect. But you could set this like smaller if you wanted a smaller texture. I actually use this like a lot if I'm rendering in Maya. It's like a super cheap, easy way to get something clothy looking. Now I do kind of want to take down the lumpiness of this bump map because it's a little ridiculous in my opinion. So I'm going to click into my bump texture, go back to my cloth node, and just click on this little right arrow button thing. And I get to my bump depth. You can, you just poke around with these buttons. Like eventually, I have no idea how to describe how to navigate with these. I just sort of like clicked around, and then now I just sort of know by like muscle memory a little bit which one to click when I need to get to stuff. So I'll take down this bump texture a little bit. Maybe something like, okay, kind of don't hate that. So I'm just going to leave that like that and be like, cool, now I have like this nice lumpy tablecloth texture. The other thing that you can do, so you can actually create sort of different textures a little bit by mapping in, like keep the same color. So quick, what color do we want this tablecloth?
Let's go with pink.
Oh God. It is like my least favorite color. It's okay. This is possibly worse than chartreuse. It's okay. I like it. Okay, so we have this horrifying salmon pink color. I find it really hard to make. Oh look, pink. Never mind. Oh my God, it's so hard to make pink. Look, they have a neon pink option. Anywho, and then does anyone have a particular pattern they feel strongly about, like a black and white sort of pattern? Wait for it. Holy crap. Alright. Black and white scrolls. This is my default thing that I search for. Fantastic. Scrolls. Alright. So I'm going to throw this into, I'm going to say roughness. And I'm going to try to create the sort of effect of maybe this is like a table with a little bit of embroidery on it or something like that, like it's been woven with a slightly shinier fabric. What did I just call that? Scrolls? Cool. So when I put that in, nothing happens. That's probably because I need to go down, again, under color balance and check alpha as luminance. Either that or it's just not displaying. Oh no, there we go. So it might not be super obvious, but like you can tell a little bit that there's like sort of the outline of this scrolly pattern in here. It's not insanely obvious. What I will do is I'll go into my place 2D texture node and I'll tile this maybe 3 times. And you can kind of see maybe a little bit more that the texture is showing up, kind of. Perhaps not. It will be quite obvious if I map this into my Metalness channel, which again, probably doesn't make a lot of sense, given that this is like a tablecloth. I just want you to see the sort of effect that can be generated. It's like if I map this in, I haven't changed the color of the object at all, but I'm getting this different effect. where you can see like this area here is like really, really shiny and reflective, and this is like more or less just normal cloth. I can also go in and be like, well, this is excessively metal, excessively like shiny and terrible looking. And you can fiddle with the color offset, and you can see the sort of texture is updating up there. So I think I actually want, what do I want here? Buttons. I don't know. You can fiddle with stuff in Maya a little bit and change how things look. I've clearly just made this far too metally and ridiculous looking. But if you were so inclined, you could absolutely make a tablecloth like this and just like a single color and just like map in other random channels into things. So any questions? Oh God, look at this. That's horrible. Any questions on what I just did there? That sweet pink shine. All right.
Where's that shine coming from?
It is reflecting, so from the Metalness channel, I'm actually going to link you guys. I actually found a really good tutorial the other day explaining like pretty much exactly what all the channels of the default Arnold shader use, or like how they work. So I'm going to link you guys that, but this is basically coming from the Metalness. What's happening is it's reflecting off of this edge, and also there's a light shining directly on this edge that's probably affecting it as well. But yeah, I mean, this is just like kind of like weird artifacting from like the tin can reflecting back onto the floor and creating that weird shine. The Metalness texture tends to be, since I actually have nothing in the background of my scene, like this is pretty much my scene. So you can see there's a light and like here's the glorious Maya nothingness in the background. If I put like an HDRI into this, I would have a lot more reflections in the tin can itself. And a lot of the stuff in the metal would get like more interesting reflections. I just happened to not map in an HDRI when I did the lighting for this. But yeah, does that kind of answer your question? Kind of. It's mostly a reflection from this light. It's mostly a reflection from this light here. So like if I will change the color of this to this blue color, which actually didn't do a whole lot. So one of the things with metal is it'll kind of affect the where is my thing? My cloth texture. So having something metal will actually take the color, and basically anything that's reflected onto it, it combines the reflection with the color of the object. So the fact that this is basically just like a reflection from the light, and since this is a slightly pinkish texture, it's coming across as really, really pink here. My light is also like a kind of orangey color, which is adding to that warmth of that reflection. Except it's totally blue now and it's not orange, but Metalness will make highlights that are the color of your object, if that makes sense. Yeah, does that possibly kind of help more? Sorry, that was a weird description there. All right, I'm going to make this light not blue because I do not want my light to be blue, because that is a terrible decision. So then there's pretty much one, if there's no more questions on this, does anyone have questions on whatever I just did? All right. So there's like 1.5 more things that I want to go over. So you can go on something like textures.com. If you go on like the PBR, physically based rendering materials, if I grab, let's see, this one might be interesting. If I grab this, so you'll scroll down, you notice you'll have basically a bunch of different textures, a bunch of different texture files for this one texture. And it gives you, so like here you have your diffuse, it's also called like albedo or albedo. This is just like color, diffuse, whatever. They're all pretty much used interchangeably. This would be like a height map. You could use this as a bump map if you wanted to. Here's like stuff for your roughness, stuff for your normal map. Pretty much whatever it says that the map is like what you'd map it into in Maya as well. But you can download all of these, and like once you plug these into Maya and you render it, it should actually give you a result that's pretty similar to the render displayed here. So that's a really powerful thing that you can do, is be able to just like go online and download pre-made textures that like already look nice if you ever need to use these for assignment. It's really good for like wood or like random metal textures. I use a lot. Not as relevant for stuff like this tin can or whatever. We need like a custom label on it. But they do also on textures.com have they have like decals. And they have somewhere they have like damage. You can usually find stuff for like scratches and other things like that, which you can add into your textures instead of just like randomly going to Google. But that's a cool thing. Mostly they're really good for like plaster stains. There's also a really neat program called Crazy Bump, which I have some videos on my YouTube channel. But if you just go to crazybump.com, you can download it here, and I actually tried this earlier. It won't let me do it without administrator privileges. Yay. It's kind of what I figured. But it's a really neat program where if you ever just like, if you take your own texture file, so like you're like, oh, this is a really cool, you know, concrete floor texture or whatever in Urban, and you like take a picture of it, you can actually import that into Crazy Bump. The UI is like really basic, but it totally works. And it'll basically import your image, and it gives you a real-time preview of the channel that you're editing. So you can edit like the specular, the bump map, roughness. You can edit all of those separately based on whatever texture file you input, and get a real-time preview. You can rotate the light around, and it's really, really cool. And then once you're done with that and you're like, oh cool, this is like how I think this looks nice for a material, you can go work on other channels, scrolling, and then you can see the it'll give you sort of this preview of all of your channels together if you want it to. So like this would be roughness, color, like ambient occlusion, all of these maps. And you'll notice like it'll put, you know, the ambient occlusion will give you this really, really dark, nice shadows between all of the rocks here. And if you notice like as he's turning the rocks, like look how the light, yes, perfect. Look how the light like shines off just the little like sticky uppy bits in the rocks. It's like a very subtle texture, but it looks really, really nice. So this is a really powerful tool to be able to come in and modify, just like take a single texture file like relatively quickly, kick out a bunch of maps that you could then import into Maya, and have render out to look pretty darn nice most of the time. So I'd highly recommend checking out Crazy Bump. There's another version, or there's another program I think called like iMaterialize or like Materialize or something, which is listed in the links folder. I downloaded it once, spent like 3 minutes with it, couldn't figure out how to open a file in it, and just like didn't get time to go back to it, but I still use Crazy Bump. So again, I would highly recommend this. It takes like literally 10 seconds to download. It's really small and efficient in terms of extracting the files. But yes, that's Crazy Bump. Any questions on that? All right. Cool. So again, for your assignment, if you guys do a tin model, I'll try to go through and perhaps make it a little bit more, what am I trying to say? A little bit more, or like a version that would be closer to what I would expect for you guys to actually submit for class. Because it would be nice also like throw in, you know, like an ingredients thing or like some other random details on it instead of like just the front of the object being done. Just like because. And that's like if you choose to do the tin. Otherwise, just sort of do whatever makes sense for your object. But yeah, I don't know.